Welcome back to another episode of the podcast, The Sapient, of course. And today we have Rachel on the show, and thank God that podcast has started to work all of a sudden. So thank you guys for screwing us on the right time. Anyways, how are you doing, Rachel?
I'm great. How are you today?
I'm doing awesome. So you are based out of Canada, right?
That's right. So I live in Calgary, Alberta. So it's the
Mhm.
Canadian Rockies. Yeah.
Got it. So how's like the environment right there?
Well, today it's really cold. I
Mhm.
will say we've had a really easy winter,
Mhm.
but we got a snow warning and I think it's going to get down to minus 25 degrees Celsius. So we are all hunkered in our homes and preparing for winter for sure.
Nice. So you're also an author, right? And an HR. Like that's a very interesting mix.
Yeah, so my professional job is in human resources.
Mhm.
I do recruitment for a large organization, but my passion projects on the side
Mhm.
are a couple of different things. And so I've always loved to write. And I recently published a book called Insights and Inspiration. It's 300 journal prompts for cultivating joy,
Mhm.
mindfulness, and gratitude. And
Mhm.
then I also do a lot of art projects on the side as well. So I have like a little flower shop where I sell like different mandala type patterns that I've made for fabric.
Mhm.
And so it's been a really fun journey because I love being able to do many different things in life
Mhm.
and being able to express myself creatively and just use my gifts in different ways.
Mhm.
So really happy to be putting my work out there in the world through writing.
Mhm.
I also do training programs and then art as well. So many things that I'm passionate about.
Got it. So what kind of inspired you to write a book?
You know, it's interesting. So I've been journaling for years, and I
Mhm.
really find that journaling is just a great way of really truly kind of connecting in and
Mhm.
becoming very aware of my emotions and where things are at. And I went through like a really challenging time in the last year. I had a family member that had a
Mhm.
very serious health crisis. And so there was like a lot of worry that was surrounding that. And through that year, just being able to journal, just having that release to kind of write, to get in touch with how I was feeling, to notice the patterns that would come up. All
Mhm.
of it just really kind of gave me this foundation.
Mhm.
Even though things were really tough and it was a really tough time, it allowed me to focus in on those things I was grateful for. It allowed me to kind of, keep my emotions in check and be there for that other person, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I find it's just such a powerful tool.
Mhm.
And of course, I shared my experience with a number of friends, and they wanted the same journal prompts. They wanted to know what
Mhm.
I was using, and then encouraged me to publish it, to just kind of put it out there into the world. And
Mhm.
so, I just even when times are tough, like I think if we can kind of do that check in, that self awareness, really try to ground ourselves and as well the things that are going right and just appreciate those moments of gratitude.
Mhm.
um, it changes the perspective of life, and I think it gives us a lot more strength to keep going. And so really I shared it, published it in that spirit of making that available to other people to have a similar experience.
Got it. So once you, let's say, decided, right, that I want to be an author, um, what kind of paths did you take? Because it's a very creative process. It's not mundane kind of, okay, let's go step by step, right?
Mhm.
So what path did you take?
Yeah, so I'm very intuitive in a lot of stuff I do, and I really wanted to you enjoy doing it, right? And so
Mhm.
I took my time with it. And the way that I approached it is I just kind of thought of like different categories that I thought would be really useful. And so,
Mhm.
a lot of things around just kind of encouraging like that mindfulness, that self reflection, The other kind of really big bucket is joy, right? So what are those things that spark joy? What are
Mm-hmm.
those things that give me pleasure? What a little bit of kind of long-term perspective, right? So when I look back on my life, like what are those moments that will really stand out that I'll be very proud of, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so if you kind of think about all those different kind of buckets, right?
Yeah.
Then what I did with those is I generated for each one kind of a bit of a philosophy around it, right?
Mm-hmm.
My perspective on it, just kind of a short paragraph, to
Mm-hmm.
introduce each theme, and then 3 or 4 journal prompts that people could use to name those things and reflect on those things for themselves. And so I didn't start off with like a grand master plan. It's really something that just kind of built,
Mm-hmm.
and then I kept adding to over time, based on what was really helpful and useful for me as well.
Got it. And at what point did you realize that book was going to be a success?
That's where the skill part comes in. So
Mm-hmm.
once I got it out there in the world, I needed to figure out like how do I make people aware of this, right? Because it's
Yeah.
only a gift if people know it and use it.
Mm-hmm.
And so number of different things. One of them is, reaching out for reviews. And
Mm-hmm.
so I have at this point over 65 reviews, which is really helpful from a
Nice.
sales perspective.
Mm-hmm.
As well, I started publishing on other sources like there's a newsletter called Medium.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started publishing articles on Medium to draw attention to it.
Got it.
And then I have a fairly large following on LinkedIn. And
Mm-hmm.
so I shared on LinkedIn as well, this publication. And
Mm-hmm.
so really just getting word out to my network was the next step. And then coming on podcasts like this, right, to share that it's available.
Definitely.
So
Yeah.
yeah, there's many, many ways I think to kind of share your gifts with the world. But,
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely the intent here. Yeah.
At what point did you realize that writing the book was only like the half part of it and marketing was like the bigger chunk, right?
Yeah, I'd say unfortunately you learned that one the hard way. So I had it published and I wanted to see something happen with it. I put a lot of work into it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started doing my research on, okay, what's next, right? How do I go about promoting this in a way that's a
Yeah.
little bit more organized? So I do really believe in that. I think that sometimes, you just kind of take the next step and
Yeah.
then you figure out the next step after that. And you don't always have to have the full plan laid
Yeah.
out, as long as you can kind of figure out what's the next step to take and
Mm-hmm.
and do that. Yeah,
Yeah. So you are self-published, right?
that's right. Yeah.
So why not go through publication?
Um, yeah, I think because I really want to be able to use it
Mm-hmm.
in different ways, right? And so I think when you publish, through a publisher,
Yeah.
it's a little bit more rigid what you can do with it, right? And how you
Yeah.
can use it and the types of promotion you need to do around it. And I really wanted to stay kind of authentic to my intentions. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's definitely a route that I could have taken, but I just loved the idea of like having, direct control over what I do with this and how I share this,
Yeah.
and how I use it. And transparently, like, some of it I want to, build into online courses as well, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
use with, I have a program which is like a success circle program. And so I
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to use portions of it in that as well.
Got it. And what do you teach in the programs?
Yeah, so the program that I've developed, and it's actually linked to the next book, which I have coming out as a
Mm-hmm.
publication. I'm calling it the Focus Flow Success Circle. And basically, what it is it's a mindful productivity system that I've developed.
Mm-hmm.
And it is really intended to bring people together so
Mm-hmm.
that they can have support
Mm-hmm.
and doing things like I've done, right? So if you're working full time, you're really
Yeah.
busy, you have
Mm-hmm.
a lot on the go, but you have a passion project that you want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it could be art, it could be writing, but something just calls to your soul, right? That
Mm-hmm.
this is a something you want to do in the world. And it's tough to find the time for that, right? Because we all are so busy in our lives.
Yeah.
And so, what this program does is it basically brings people together. So, there's a structure, right, for
Mm-hmm.
making sure that we can achieve things in a way that that feels good and is really, very effective. but then also a circle of support, right? So that we're not
Mm-hmm.
in it alone. Because sometimes as creatives, it can feel really lonely, right? If you're,
Yeah.
trying to create something, bring something out into the world, and you
Mm-hmm.
don't have that kind of network or that circle of support. And so it's both like kind of a systematic way of approaching things, but also
Mm-hmm.
really that gift of community. And because mindfulness is such a critical piece for how I'm
Mm-hmm.
approaching that, it's really a mindful productivity system. There's definitely aspects of the book that I want to kind of weave into that,
Mm-hmm.
because they really tie in very beautifully. So what I'm
Mm-hmm.
offering is, very much a circle of support and a mindful productivity system.
Got it. So would you say that the whole creative process, right, of creating anything, right, music, acting, book writing or anything, right, do you think it's rather a lonely kind of journey, like it needs to be solo?
Yeah, so it can be, but I think there's ways we can also make sure that we support each other, right? And
Mm-hmm.
make it less lonely. So I'll share a little example. I've been doing mandala art for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first did it, it was it was a community group that came together to do it for 8 weeks, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
people would come together. They would have moments where they would draw in silence, but at the end, we would all come together and we would share
Mm-hmm.
what we had created and what it meant to us. And that process of like, yes, like you create, individually, right, depending on the
Mm-hmm.
art form that you do, but then being able to kind of share it in a circle,
Mm-hmm.
it just it really just reinforces how you use your creativity, and I think
Yeah.
it sparks other ideas. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think there's a real power to not doing it completely in isolation, but
Mm-hmm.
finding those moments to also come together.
Yeah, because the reason I ask you that is kind of the best creative work, if you look at any field, came from isolation,
Mm.
right? Like kind of isolation from society, because the creative person had to step out and figure out a way to do good work.
Yeah, like you absolutely have to carve out time, right, to do
Hmm.
this. Like I think
Yeah.
that's the pressure for people is, making sure that you have that ability and that time to like
Hmm.
truly focus, right?
Yeah.
Because you're right, like you don't create great work, right? If you're kind of scattered, you're, doing it
Yeah.
off the side of your desk, right?
Hmm.
Like having that ability to really kind of, focus and prioritize it,
Hmm.
I think is absolutely critical, and then
Yeah.
honing your skills as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not doing something once but doing it multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely, there's a lot that I think we do individually, but I think that the feedback is important too. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you go out and you create an isolation and then you don't have that feedback, you don't have that energetic connection with other people,
Mm-hmm.
the work may not have as much meaning, right? Or be
Mm-hmm.
meaningful for others. And so while we do a lot alone, I do think like that community focus is really important as well.
Got it. Because if you really think about it, right, every artist or a author is working on future, because you're writing a piece that's going to make sense in probably next 2 years, right? Because that's when you're going to publish it.
Hmm.
So if you're creating a piece of like music or a piece of documentary, it has to make sense 2 years down the line, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the paradox that creative people have to operate in, right? Because I have spoken to a lot of fictional and non-fictional writers, and they're like, yeah, of course I need to write for future,
Hmm.
right? um, so do you think when you ask feedback from people who are not creatives, so non-creatives, right, just regular people, do you think the quality of the work goes down?
So I think it depends on the type of work that you're doing and what you're looking to achieve, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you think of visionary artists, right, and their work is like not understood in their generation,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really different thing than
Yeah.
trying to create something for people to use, right? That will transform lives, that will impact lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the purpose of why you're creating might inform some of that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you create something and it's brilliant and it's an absolute isolation, and you don't have people interact with the work in some way, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that it loses the transformative power,
Mm-hmm.
and in not kind of having people appreciate or interact with it in some way, it doesn't impact lives, right? And so it depends on why you're doing your art and what you want to get out of your art. But for me, like it would, really be a shame if somebody created something, exceptionally innovative or
Mm-hmm.
beautiful or moving, and then it wasn't seen, right? It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
shared, right? And
Yeah.
so the feedback, I don't think, if you're looking for feedback to kind of like directly impact the work, I think that that's a little bit different, right? You would want to
Yeah.
choose, creatives that you trust, right? You would want
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
choose, reviews or feedback from people that you respect and you like their work. But when it comes to like feedback in terms of like actually seeing an impact in the world, that's what I think art has the potential to do, right? I do think it has the potential to influence and transform lives, right? It opens up
Mm-hmm.
possibilities. It opens up, moments of creativity, right? It inspires people. And so, on that level, like, the feedback is even the fact that get sales, right? Or that you have people
Mm-hmm.
view or use the work in some way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's a very hard thing to gauge, right? Like to know whether it would work or not.
Hmm.
Um, and even to estimate whether it would connect with the audience that you're targeting for, right?
Yeah.
Because there are like multiple examples of books, right, which were written for a set of group of people, but them, you know, the particular group of people did not accept it. But it's like worldwide good work, right? So that's also kind of a dilemma for an author when they say, okay, this is my target audience, right, or the target reader. So how did you come, I would say, narrow down to that particular segment?
Yeah. So what I would say is like, I think it's going to be a miss for anybody if you kind of try to, guess, right, what your readers need, right, without
Mm-hmm.
having conversations with people, right? And so when I talked about, the work that I had to develop with the mindfulness, right, like that was me, coming from an experience, sharing my experience in dialogue with others, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then encouraged to publish, right? And so it wasn't, sitting down to kind of, write, with a
Mm-hmm.
target audience in mind
Yeah.
without bringing experience to that or being in relationship around that. With the next piece of work that I have coming out, the focus flow formula, it's very similar, right? And so it is like, it's inspired by something that I've created, but for it to come alive, it has to be in dialogue with people. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've kind of tested it out, right, to make sure it actually resonates with people, and who does
Mm-hmm.
it resonate with.
Yeah.
And that's where you really believe, like, if you don't do your work in isolation, if you do it within community,
Yeah.
then it's more likely to land and it's more likely to make a difference.
Yeah, because you already have kind of beta testers for your book, right?
Hmm.
You got your people, or set of people that you would show your work to and kind of gauge, how what's their response is.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that that does make sense. In terms of when you talk about community and coming together and creating a lot of stuff from the same community, right?
Yes. Yeah. And inspiring each other, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
it can be really lonely to create. And so, to get, words of inspiration, right? To get
Mm-hmm.
support, right? If you're running into obstacles, to be able to, have people to speak with, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think that makes a difference in terms of keeping things going. I do think, honestly, one of the biggest obstacles, like for a lot of people that are doing creative work kind of not as their full-time occupation, but, just
Mm-hmm.
something they're passionate about, it can be really tough to prioritize that. And
Yeah.
so if you're working full time, you're raising a family, maybe you have responsibility for, elders in the family as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
there's a lot going on, right?
Yep.
And I don't know if this is true for men, but for women I've spoken with, often there can be like feelings of guilt for
Mm-hmm.
saying, you know what, I'm gonna all this is happening, and I know I need to keep all these balls going, but I'm going to take this 2 hours to myself and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
do something creative, right? Or I'm going to make
Yeah.
sure I have an hour every single day to do
Mm-hmm.
something that I'm passionate about that's just for me. And
Yeah.
that can be like a really hard space to claim and step into, to say,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do that and I'm not going to feel guilty about that because this
Yeah.
is something that's important to me. And
Yeah.
so, when we kind of think about it from a time management perspective, right? It's not just managing time, it's really managing mindset,
Mm-hmm.
to say that, the work that I'm doing is important enough that I need to make the time for it.
Yeah. I think it's not a gender kind of perspective about guilt,
Hmm.
um because if you're a creative, I imagine you're working on something that is not there yet. So it doesn't exist, so you cannot quantify your progress, right? So if when you say, okay, let me spend an hour a day, right? There is no way of quantifying your efforts,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Because
that's true.
you cannot measure it by, it's not like software where you're like, okay, I wrote 200 lines of code today, right? You cannot do that. You cannot say, yeah, I wrote like 3 pages, because most probably those 3 pages won't make it to the book or to the the final version. And
Yeah.
I think there is this pressure, because the way corporate and our professional lives are built, that everything is measured in terms of progress, right? um, and progress can be measured when there is something to replicate of, right? And you're creating this new thing, you don't know whether it's working or not. And of course, as you said, there is this guilt of, you know am I doing the right thing, like, right? Will I
Yeah.
be that one person who is weird? Yeah, and it's I feel like it's especially harder for extroverts,
Mm.
right? Because introverts are very okay with isolation and blocking out noise, because that's like their natural ability. But
Yeah.
for extroverts, it's kind of hard. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about the extrovert introvert dynamic to it, but that
Hmm,
probably does
yeah.
make a huge difference, right?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
if you're an
Yeah.
extrovert, right, and you have this attachment to so social life,
Hmm.
it can be hard to give that up.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like when you're creating something, social gatherings or social stuff can be desensitizing. Like, it can pull you away from what you're trying to create, and it can introduce a lot of dynamics.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Like, and I think, even just the family dynamics too, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're, you know, you, you've got all the social circles, et cetera, but even just kind of keeping the home going, the family going, and working full time, right?
Hmm.
That's a lot for a lot of people, right? And so,
Yeah.
kind of, claiming that time, finding ways to have that time, I
Mm.
think is, it's a really intentional choice, right? And it's a way of kind
Yeah.
of saying, what I do matters, right? Like what that I have, something inside of me that I want to do, that I believe in.
Yeah.
It brings me joy, it brings me pleasure, and it's worth doing. And so, I think it's a just a beautiful thing, right? When you can have
Mhm.
creative people,
Yeah.
have that time to create.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Looking for a meaningful gift this holiday season? Equanima's emotional intelligence tools are perfect for anyone wanting to deepen their relationships and grow personally. Choose the Relationship Playbox to strengthen emotional bonds, the Triggered Response cards to navigate emotional triggers with ease, or the Emotional Intelligence Toolkit for a complete self awareness journey. And here's something just for Sapient listeners: use the code SAPIENT10 at checkout for 10% off your order. Visit Equanima to explore their game-changing products and start your journey toward a mindful and connected 2024.
Yeah, because what you say is kind of makes sense, because if you look at the stand-up comedy scene worldwide, right? Um, stand-up comedy was very good when it was in the marginals of the society rather than the main focus. And now that it has become the main focus, now the quality is gone, right? So it's like, creative people need that kind of, um, you know, like ticked off from society, like society doesn't expect anything from them, right? Because if you look at
Mhm.
any great poet of any era, of any civilization, they were not celebrated as poets, right? um and a non-creative can even question, like, why do you need to exist as a poet?
Right, where for them it's like a calling from within the soul, right?
Right.
Like it's an undeniable calling. Yeah. Yeah.
And they had to
Yeah.
go through all the hardship of rejection and isolation,
Hmm.
to create something greater that lasted their whole civilization, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, what do you think it takes to create something that's actually like meaningful and not just like fluffed up content?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it depends on like so there's a number of different components, right? So
Mhm.
skill is certainly one of them. So if you look
Yeah.
at, the great poets, I mean they honed their skills, right, through lots of
Hmm.
practice, right? And maybe not everything they wrote, right, did they choose to put out into the world, right? So I think
Yep.
that, skill development like absolutely is critical to any great endeavors.
Hmm.
But I think as well like inspiration, right? Like I think having a voice, having a story to tell,
Hmm.
having something to say, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's art or it's poetry, or it's theater, like, having something
Hmm.
where you want to share in some way.
Hmm.
And I think the work that's really, impactful is something that's potentially transformational, right? And
Hmm.
so I can think of, great poetry I've read where it just makes you stop and think, right? And
Yeah.
it just opens up kind of possibility because you stop, you pause, you have to think about it, right? So it's
Yep.
it's a little bit challenging, and so
Hmm.
it can be a fine balance to find, but I think that those people that just absolutely excel in what they've done,
Hmm.
they have that combination of skill and then intent and a story to share, right? Like something that
Yeah.
is impactful, that connects with other people, that people can relate to in some way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also interesting that most creatives come from a dark place. Like, they have a lot of negative stuff in their life, yet they project positivity, right? That's like a kind of interesting thing, because then you really think about, okay, how, what is the angle that this author is coming from, right? And a lot of authors don't, I feel like, authors are not good marketers, like they don't talk about themselves or right? They struggle at marketing, and often even good work, gets left out because they are not able to tell their story effectively.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's probably why a lot of people do kind of go with a larger publishing house, right? Where
Hmm.
you can have the supports to do that because, maybe the person that, creates the work is not always the best person to market the work, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Because that's why I asked you in the starting, why
Hmm.
self-publishing? Because, like, yeah, of course, in today's world, publishing is rather easy, right, compared to, I don't know, 10 years ago or 15 years ago.
Hmm.
But the grind is really there. You really have to work on it. I'm sure, you must have worked on it. You would feel it, like the work is kind of excruciating, and it's not a loving process, right?
Well, it can be though, right? So I think this
Mm-hmm.
is where mindset comes in.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm just really fortunate, right? But
Or
The
maybe maybe you're just an extrovert. You just like to talk to people.
I do. So that might be the secret sauce here. I
Yeah,
am like for my job, right? I talk to people. This is what I do, right? So,
yeah.
connecting with people actually brings me joy. It brings me pleasure. Like I find it
Hmm.
energizing. So yeah, there
Yeah,
it could very well be that there's like a personality dynamic at work there as well.
yeah,
That's probably working in my favor.
yeah. Because imagine you were an introvert, right? All you want to
Hmm.
do is write a book, maybe publish it, and just go back, like go back to your place, right? Um,
Yeah, I think it depends too. Like, like there's a real difference, I think, between fiction and nonfiction. So,
yeah,
when I think about, some of the nonfiction, right?
yeah.
This is where the intent comes in. Like, why are you writing it? And so,
Hmm.
I think about one that I had read recently, which was "The Miracle Morning" by
Hmm.
uh, uh, Elrod, like Hal Elrod.
Hmm.
He wrote it coming out of his own experience, right? He
Hmm.
wrote it because he found a system that worked for him,
Hmm.
that really made a huge difference for him, and he wanted to share it, right?
Hmm.
And so when you're, thinking about nonfiction, right, and there's that kind of practical application of, how it is that it can transform people's lives and change people's lives. I think when you have a story to tell like that and it can make a
Hmm.
difference for people,
Yeah.
it's really motivating, right? And so that's kind of the place where my work is coming from as well, right? Is the fact
Hmm.
that I think this could make a huge difference in people's lives, and I've
Hmm.
seen it transform lives, and I want to have a larger impact and impact more people.
Yeah.
And so I think that when you're talking about those types of books, it's really
Hmm.
different than fiction, which can be tremendously impactful. Like there's,
Yeah.
stories that I've read when I think of like, uh, just did, they touch you for life, right?
Yeah.
I think of the work of Toni Morrison, or, some people that I absolutely adore, right?
Hmm.
And they stay with you. Like those stories are really impactful.
Hmm.
But I think it's much more challenging to do that type
Yeah.
of writing than
Yep.
something that's intended to, and created with the purpose of making a
Hmm.
difference in the world.
Yeah. I feel like I agree with you because if you look at the whole Sherlock Holmes series,
Hmm.
right? Who in their right mind could imagine that? Right? Because it's
Yeah.
elaborate. It's not
Hmm.
like one or two characters in the story. There are so many characters and there are so many connections that it's very unique and interesting. Whereas non-fiction requires you to be more grounded into reality and uh, not fade away from it, right? As you slowly try to communicate what you're trying to, uh, you know, deliver, right?
Hmm.
So when you write your books, is it more of a storytelling point of view, or is it just like presenting facts kind of approach that you take?
No, so when I write, what I have in mind when I'm writing is I really am thinking about my audience, and I'm
Hmm.
thinking about the experience and what I want them to get out of it.
Hmm.
And honestly, I want them to interact with the material and apply it, right? Because
Hmm.
that's where the difference comes in. And so when I'm writing, it's really taking that perspective of what is it that's going to allow me to kind of connect effectively with my audience,
Hmm.
share stories that people can relate to, that are going to be meaningful for them, and are going to help them see the possibility of how they can then apply that to their lives, right?
Hmm.
And so the audience is always like the center of everything,
Yeah.
but really, from the perspective of helping people transform. Yeah.
Hmm. And when do you think AI is going to take your job?
So it's interesting. I think AI can help my job. I don't think it can take my job.
Hmm.
I think that the piece of connecting with people, understanding people, having conversations with people,
Hmm.
that is something that's not going away. When I look at larger companies and where they're putting like a lot of their focus as well, if you want to kind of talk about the AI trends, like there's a lot more focus on connecting with customers, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's coming from that place of like, we know there's a lot that AI can do,
Mm-hmm.
but we know when it comes to people, right, that
Yeah.
that is a skill set that is always needed, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, whether it's writing or whether it's delivering like a business service to customers, being able to connect with people, understand their obstacles, understand their challenges, help people identify solutions, right? All of these things are skills that I think would be really hard for AI to replicate.
Got it. With today's, I would say, pace of content generation, be
Hmm.
it written, academic, or visuals, right? Do you think there'll be a time when books will be irrelevant?
I sure hope not. I will be really curious to see where we're at 10 years from now. I
Yeah.
think how we access information may change, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, if you look at like all these cycles for everything are speeding up exponentially because of AI. And so maybe it's not, that you have like, a book or an article that you reference as much as, a database of information, right? That AI curates for you based on what you need, right? So
Yeah.
I think the possibilities for how we will interact with information will
Mm-hmm.
change. But I
Yeah.
think the what you do with it, the how you apply it with your life,
Mm-hmm.
how you make meaning from it, how you leverage it, right?
Yeah.
That those are always the aspects that will remain human.
Yeah. But also, if you look at it, right, um, the most valuable content, be it written, academic, or visual, um, is usually not mainstream. Like a lot of
Mm.
people don't like it, right? And if AI works on the same popularity contest that people think it works, then it wouldn't be able to give you those particular suggestions that you'd have to find out on your own.
And that spark of creativity, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of those other pieces that, certainly there's the lot of compiling of information, right? But I don't think we're in a place yet where you can kind of have that spark of creativity that comes from people.
Yeah. Because it's interesting, right? Like we have all this technology, in terms of human betterment, yet people still do work for 12 hours a day.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully that will change in our lifetimes, but we
I
will
don't
see.
think so. To be honest, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because it's like, um, you know, it's just the process of the extraction of human resource, right? Like it's the only thing is it's infinite,
Mm.
right? It's a non-combustible resource. Like it will never end. You could always harness it whenever you want to,
Mm.
right? Because if you look at the big factories and stuff, right, the only things that are not automated is where, uh, it makes more sense to employ people because it just saves them cost.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, the reason I brought it up is, if you look at this whole creative process, it's becoming very similar, where people have started to, uh, get into ghostwriting and, AI content generation into their books, to get to publishing as soon as possible.
Yeah, and like I think there's a lot of concerns, right, that will flood the market, right? And
Yeah, I
so
mean it's already flooding,
yeah, already
kind
flooding,
of.
right? Yeah, yeah. And so how do you stand out in that crowd, right?
Yeah,
For sure. Yeah.
because previously, like coloring books, for example, it used to be someone who's an artist who would
Hmm.
sit down and you know come up with this art for coloring book. Now it's like AI. Let's do it through AI. So if you look at the coloring book market right now,
Hmm.
whoever had a career making color books like 5 years ago is done, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's absolutely changed things very quickly for sure. I
Yeah.
think a course that I had taken, I had done a course at one point in terms of kind of illustrations.
Hmm.
And it was they had like a lot of stuff where they were training people, for example, if you had like a periodical and you needed like an image for that, right? Or a
Mhm.
newspaper needed like an image. And I'm sure that all of like that was 5 years ago that I took that, right? And I'm sure that all of that is now
It
computer
just wiped
generated.
out. Yeah, it just wiped
Yeah.
out.
And it's scary what you can do now, right? Because you can say
Yeah.
you could take the work of like a well-known image or style or artist, and you can say, please create this for me in that style. Right. And
Yes.
so I know there's a lot that people are kind of working through in terms of like intellectual property,
Hmm.
copyright ownership. Like it's a really, hot topic because of,
Yeah.
the what AI is enabled, right? And just how
Hmm.
quickly it's enabled it.
Yeah.
But I do think through all of that, like I don't know, it's maybe I'm naive in this, but I just really think that we will crave human connection, right? We'll want to still be able to relate to people who are the authors or the creators or the artists. Um, you know, uh, if you think about, movie actors, like yes, they could generate them out of AI at this point, probably, but being able to, connect, know that they're real people and kind of have some sense of connection, right? I think will
Yes.
still remain really important. So I do think that some of that kind of noise, right, of just
Hmm.
how much information's available,
Yeah.
won't necessarily you know stand in the way of people kind of really kind of connecting together still, right? Like I think that will remain
Yeah.
really important.
Because the CTO or some leader in the open AI said, when they were asked a similar question, they said art should not be gatekept. It should not be gatekept. It
Mm.
should not be something that's very hard to do. And I'm like, so is your job then? Like, right? If AI can draw a good painting, then it should also be able to do a role of a CTO then, because it can be argued that most of these positions are do not need any creativity at all, right? Because you're working off a
Mm.
boiler template, whereas art is creative, like, and it's alarming to see this kind of disregard for creatives from the AI industry,
Mm.
right? Because now, I don't know whether you're active in YouTube. When you go to upload a YouTube video, it asks you, should we use your content to train AI? So if
Yeah.
if you're an artist, you're screwed, right? Because it's like, those software engineers who literally wrote themselves out of jobs,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think about friends of mine that are artists, and part of the I think there there's things that require like absolute skill, right? And
Yeah,
there's things that you produce that are like hard, right? In this world, right? They're
exactly.
not just
Yeah.
ideas. So I think about seeing glass blowers at work, right? Like
Hmm.
that is
Yeah.
something that there's been for years, right, arguments over, is it like a craft or is it an art, right?
Hmm.
And it depends on what you do with it. But the
Yeah.
reality is, like, the incredible amount of skill that's required, right, in
Yeah.
an art form or a craft form like that, right?
Hmm.
And so I think that where there is like skill and creativity, and meaning, and it doesn't sound like everything else, that kind of stands out or has a story to tell, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of great art has a story,
Yeah.
and
No, but
around how
also
you
the
interpret it.
fact,
Yeah.
yeah, but also the fact that those skills are not inherent, like in nature. Like
Hmm.
you put effort towards you and you learned it,
Yeah.
right? Like you made a conscious effort for years on end to master this one skill, and now there
Hmm.
is you know um, a young person who thinks they are smart ass, and they say, the skill should not be gate kept. Right? The example she gave is, I can't draw, but everybody should be able to draw masterpieces,
Mm.
because it's not that big of a thing. Then
Interesting.
it's like that, right? Where it's ironic more than anything, because then you say, okay, then let everybody do your job then. Like, why not? Why only you should be able to do that job, right? Because it's similar. Because when a person like that, right, attack the whole creative industry, um they should expect some get backs or something that comes back to them, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't know about the future. That's why I asked you the question, do you think books will be relevant?
Yeah.
Because there is so much content spewed out right now that it doesn't make sense to sit and read like a 500-page book.
Well, and our attention span's getting shorter too, right? Like,
Do you think so?
yeah, yeah. The way that we interact with information is changing as
Well,
well.
I
Yeah.
think that's a whole new debate, because
Hmm.
it's a double-edged sword. Because when people say, like, people's retention is just not there, um, then my question is, do you think then the quality of what we're consuming has gone down? That might be the reason.
Mm, I
Because
mean,
people are still willing to watch like Godfather, right?
yeah, I think there's a generational aspect to this. So my
Mm-hmm.
son is 11, and I
Mm-hmm.
watch how he and his friends interact with information on devices,
Yep.
and it is really different, right,
Mm-hmm.
than how it would have been when I was his age. And so I
Yeah,
do
but
think,
also, Rachel, like things like vinyl records are coming back,
yeah,
and
yeah, making a
vinyl
return.
records are not
Yeah,
like 4 5 minute bangers. They're
yeah,
like 30
yeah.
minute plus. So I feel like it's like the same thing, right? Because there is so
Mm,
much content produced. People
yeah.
are like, why should I watch you for 3 hours when I can watch like two Marvel movies in three
Mm,
hours? Because a Marvel
interesting.
movie is like 120 minutes.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's like 90 minutes.
Mm.
And you're like, hold on. Right? So it's like that kind of takeoff or a comparison, right? Whether
Hmm.
is it actually our attention span getting down, or is it like content is getting shittier?
Maybe it's both.
Yeah, maybe it's both. Maybe it's both. Because I don't know whether cricket is a sport, right?
Mhm.
So there is a format of cricket which takes place in 5 days. It takes 5 days to complete one match,
Wow.
and it was going away, right? But now younger people are like, and there is a shorter version which takes like 4 hours, and more people are willing to watch 5 days than 4 hours now, because
Oh,
they're like,
wow. Okay.
yeah, 4 hours, it's good, it's entertaining, but it's not real value. They're realizing that.
Hmm.
So they're like, okay, let's actually get back to 5 days.
Oh, wow. That's neat.
And that's like a interesting switch,
Yeah.
right? So, you know I don't know, hopefully books will survive the future.
Yeah.
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 So yeah, I think that kind of wraps up our conversation, hopefully. Because hopefully we provided this whole, like, a close-ended communication to our audience. So guys, this is the end of the episode. So thank you, Rachel, for being here, and taking your time, of course. Yeah, and you're welcome back anytime you want.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me. That was a really interesting and very thought provoking discussion. So thank you very much.
Yep, thank you once again for being here. And guys, until next episode, take care and just live.
Thanks for listening to Sapient. Before we wrap up, a shout out to our sponsor, Equanima. Their tools like the Relationship Playbox, Triggered Response Cards, and Emotional Intelligence Toolkit make amazing gifts to inspire clarity, focus, and connection in 2024. And remember, Sapient listeners get 10% off with the code SAPIENT10. Head over to equanima.io to grab these powerful tools and give a gift that truly makes a difference. Happy holidays!